The lights inside the America's Got Talent theater dimmed slowly, and a quiet murmur rolled across the packed audience. Thousands of people shifted in their seats, whispering to each other while the giant AGT logo glowed across the stage. Cameras floated through the air, searching for reactions from excited fans who had waited all day to witness another unforgettable night of performances. Backstage, Yeng Constantino stood alone in a narrow hallway lit by soft yellow lights. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the microphone close to her chest. She had performed in front of massive crowds before, but this moment felt completely different. This was not just another concert. This was America's Got Talent. One performance here could change everything. A production assistant approached her with a nervous smile. 30 seconds, Yeng, she nodded quietly. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the audience anymore. For years, Yeng had inspired millions with her voice and songwriting. In her home country, people already knew her as a star. But tonight was not about fame. Tonight was about proving something deeper. She wanted the world to hear the pain, hope, and emotion hidden inside every lyric she sang. Simon Cowell glanced down at the notes on his desk while the crowd continued buzzing with anticipation. "Howie, do you know much about this contestant?" Sofia Vergara asked. Howie Mandel shrugged. "I heard she's huge in the Philippines." Simon leaned back in his chair. "Well, popularity means nothing here. It's all about the performance." The audience suddenly erupted into cheers as Terry Crews walked confidently onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Terry announced with excitement, "our next performer is a singer-songwriter from the Philippines who has touched millions with her music. Please welcome, Yeng Constantino." The theater exploded with applause. Yeng stepped into the spotlight wearing a simple white outfit that shimmered gently beneath the stage lights. She looked calm from a distance, but her breathing revealed how emotional she truly was. The judges smiled politely as she approached the center of the stage. "Welcome," Simon said. "Tell us who you are." "My name is Yeng Constantino," she replied softly. "And why AGT?" Simon asked. Yeng paused for a moment. "Because music saved my life," she answered. The room instantly became quieter. She continued carefully, her voice trembling. "There were moments in my life when I felt completely lost. I wrote songs because I didn't know how else to survive emotionally. And tonight, I want to sing for every person who feels broken but still keeps fighting." The audience responded with warm applause. Simon folded his hands together, suddenly more interested. "And what are you singing tonight?" "A song I wrote during one of the hardest moments of my life." The cameras zoomed in on the judges. Even Simon's expression softened. "Well," he said quietly, "good luck." The lights faded into darkness. For several seconds, the theater became completely silent. Then a single piano note echoed through the room. Yeng closed her eyes. The first lyric left her lips so gently that people leaned forward to listen. Her voice carried an ache that felt painfully real. Every word sounded personal. Every note felt honest. As the melody grew stronger, the audience stopped moving entirely. Nobody whispered. Nobody checked their phones. Thousands of strangers sat frozen as Yeng poured her heart into the performance. The giant screens above the stage showed tears forming in the eyes of audience members. Sophia pressed her hand against her chest. Heidi Klum blinked rapidly, clearly emotional. But Simon Cowell remained still. Completely still. He watched Yeng carefully, almost like he was trying to understand something hidden beneath the song. The second verse arrived, and suddenly everything changed. Yeng's voice exploded with power. Not just vocal power, emotional power. The pain in her lyrics transformed into something overwhelming and beautiful. Her voice cracked slightly during one line, but instead of ruining the performance, it made the moment even more real. A woman in the audience covered her mouth and started crying. Another person stood up. Then another. Within seconds, half the theater was already on its feet. Simon's eyes never left the stage. Yeng reached the chorus. The lighting turned gold, surrounding her in warmth while the music swelled dramatically behind her. Her voice soared through the theater with stunning control and raw emotion. People weren't just listening anymore. They were feeling every word. The audience erupted into cheers in the middle of the performance. But Yeng stayed focused. She sang like someone reliving every painful memory inside the song. The cameras suddenly cut to Simon. His expression had changed. The famous judge known for brutal criticism looked shaken. His eyes glistened beneath the stage lights. Backstage crew members exchanged stunned looks. As Simon crying, one whispered. The song grew quieter again. Yeng stepped forward slowly, tears beginning to form in her own eyes. Then she delivered the final bridge. The theater fell silent once more. No background noise, no movement, just her voice, pure, broken, human. By the time she reached the final note, many people in the audience were openly crying. And then came the moment nobody expected. Simon Cowell lowered his head. He wiped his eyes. The crowd gasped. Cameras immediately zoomed toward him. For years, viewers around the world had seen Simon criticize contestants without hesitation. He rarely showed emotion, rarely looked vulnerable, but tonight was different. Yeng stood silently on stage as the final piano note faded away. For one breathtaking second, nobody moved. Then the entire theater exploded. A deafening standing ovation shook the room. People screamed, cheered, cried. The judges rose to their feet together. Sophia clapped with tears streaming down her face. Howie kept shaking his head in disbelief. Heidi looked completely stunned. And Simon, he continued applauding while quietly trying to compose himself. Yeng covered her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. She looked overwhelmed by the reaction. The audience continued chanting her name. Yeng, Yeng, Yeng. The noise became almost impossible to control. Terry Crews walked backstage watching a monitor with wide eyes. That, he whispered, was unbelievable. After nearly a full minute, the applause finally began to settle. Yeng stood trembling at center stage. Simon reached for his microphone first. But before speaking, he paused. The audience noticed immediately. He looked emotional again. Yeng, he began slowly. Then he stopped. He exhaled deeply. I've been doing this for a very long time. The room became silent, and every once in a while, someone walks onto this stage and reminds us why music matters. The crowd applauded. Simon pointed toward her gently. That performance wasn't perfect technically. A few audience members looked confused. But honestly, Simon continued, I didn't care, because what you gave us tonight was truth. The audience erupted again. Simon's voice lowered. You can teach technique, you can improve vocals, but you cannot teach honesty. And when you sang, every person in this room believed you. Yeng began crying harder. Simon looked down for a moment before speaking again. There was one lyric in particular that hit me very personally. The cameras zoomed in. Simon rarely opened up emotionally. He swallowed carefully. My father passed away many years ago. And there was something about your performance tonight that reminded me of the conversations I wish I could still have with him. The audience fell completely silent. Even the judges looked shocked. Simon nodded slightly. So yes, you got to me. The crowd burst into applause. Yeng covered her face, overwhelmed. Howie leaned toward his microphone. I've never seen Simon admit that before, he joked softly. The audience laughed warmly. But seriously, Howie continued, that was one of the most emotionally authentic performances we've ever had on this stage. Heidi smiled at Yeng. You have this incredible gift, she said. When you sing, people feel safe enough to cry. Sophia nodded immediately. That wasn't just singing, Sophia added. That was storytelling. That was pain turning into art. The audience applauded again. Yeng wiped tears from her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered. Simon leaned forward. You know, he said, before you started, I honestly thought this would just be another good singer. The crowd laughed softly. But now, Simon continued, I think you might be one of the most important contestants we've had this season. Yeng stared at him in shock. Then Simon smiled. And for that reason, the audience suddenly screamed. People already knew what might happen. Simon glanced toward the giant golden buzzer above the judge's desk. Yeng's eyes widened. No way, someone shouted from the crowd. Simon slowly stood up. The theater exploded into chaos. Yeng immediately began shaking her head. Oh my God, she whispered. Simon looked at her carefully. I think millions of people around the world need to hear your voice. He reached toward the button. And I think this moment deserves something special. Slam. The golden buzzer exploded. Gold confetti erupted from the ceiling like fireworks. The audience screamed louder than ever before. Yeng collapsed to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. Music thundered through the theater while golden confetti rained across the stage. Simon walked onto the stage as the crowd continued cheering wildly. Yeng looked completely overwhelmed. Simon helped her stand. "You earned this," he told her. She hugged him tightly while still crying. For a rare moment, Simon hugged her back with genuine emotion. The audience couldn't stop cheering. Backstage, crew members wiped away tears while watching monitors. One producer whispered, "This is going viral tonight." Terry Crews finally ran onto the stage laughing and shouting, "This is what AGT is all about." Gold confetti continued falling around them. Yeng looked up toward the audience, stunned by the love pouring toward her from every corner of the theater. At that moment, it felt like the entire world had stopped. But the biggest surprise was still waiting. As the celebration continued, Simon quietly pulled Yeng aside near the judges' table. The microphones barely captured his voice. "I need to tell you something," he said. Yeng nodded nervously. Simon glanced toward the audience. "There are contestants who entertain people." Then he pointed gently toward her heart. "And then there are contestants who heal people." Yeng immediately broke down again. The audience heard enough to start applauding once more. Within minutes, clips of the performance began spreading online. Fans uploaded emotional reactions to social media. People posted videos of Simon crying. Viewers around the world couldn't believe what they were seeing. Simon Cowell actually cried. "Best AGT performance ever. This woman deserves the world." The internet exploded. By the end of the night, hashtags connected to Yeng Constantino dominated social media trends across multiple countries. Meanwhile backstage, Yeng finally sat alone in a quiet dressing room. The energy of the theater still echoed faintly through the walls. Her hands continued trembling. She looked down at the golden confetti resting in her lap. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then her mother entered the room. The second Yeng saw her, she burst into tears again. Her mother embraced her tightly. "You did it," she whispered. Yeng shook her head. "No," she cried softly. "We did it." Her mother smiled through tears. They stayed like that for several moments. Outside the dressing room, producers rushed through hallways discussing the overwhelming audience reaction. Even veteran staff members admitted they had rarely seen anything like it. One cameraman said, "I've worked here for 8 years. I've never seen Simon emotional like that." Another replied, "That performance felt bigger than television." And honestly, it did. Because something unusual had happened that night. People from different countries, different backgrounds, and different lives connected emotionally through one song. Yeng's performance became more than entertainment. It became a shared human moment. Hours later, Simon sat quietly in his trailer reviewing footage from the audition. Normally he moved on quickly after filming. But not tonight. He replayed the final chorus again. And again. A producer entered carefully. "You okay?" Simon nodded slowly. "She reminded me why we started this show in the first place," he admitted. The producer smiled. "She's special." Simon looked back toward the screen. "Yes," he said quietly. "She really is." The next morning, news outlets everywhere covered the audition. Entertainment websites posted headlines calling it one of the greatest AGT moments ever. Reaction channels uploaded videos of themselves crying during the performance. Millions of views poured in within hours. Fans around the world started sharing their own personal stories online. Some talked about losing loved ones. Others shared battles with depression, heartbreak, or loneliness. Many said Yeng's song gave them comfort. One comment received thousands of likes. "She didn't just sing. She gave people permission to feel again." Even celebrities began reposting clips from the audition. Suddenly Yeng Constantino wasn't just trending. She was becoming a global emotional phenomenon. Days later, when Yeng finally returned to the AGT stage for rehearsals, the atmosphere backstage felt completely different. Contestants whispered excitedly when she walked past. Crew members smiled warmly at her. Even security guards congratulated her. But despite all the attention, Yeng remained humble. She continued thanking every staff member she met. During rehearsal breaks, she often sat quietly by herself writing lyrics in a notebook. One afternoon, Simon unexpectedly approached her backstage. "You doing okay?" he asked. Yeng smiled nervously, still trying to process everything. Simon nodded. "That reaction was real," he told her. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. She looked down. I was scared people wouldn't understand my music. Simon immediately shook his head. Emotion doesn't need translation, he said. Yeng smiled softly, and for a brief moment, they simply stood there in silence. Not judge and contestant, just two human beings connected by a powerful memory. As the live shows approached, pressure began building around Yeng's next performance. Fans online constantly asked the same question. How can she possibly top that audition? But Yeng tried not to focus on expectations. For her, music had never been about competition. It had always been about connection. On the night of the live shows, the theater once again filled with thousands of fans. But this time, the energy felt electric before Yeng even appeared. People held homemade signs with her name. Some audience members traveled from different countries just to see her perform live. Backstage, Yeng closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She remembered the fear she felt during her audition. But she also remembered Simon's words. You heal people. For the first time since arriving at AGT, she truly believed it. When Terry Crews introduced her again, the crowd erupted instantly. And as Yeng stepped back into the spotlight, she realized something important. No matter what happened next, she had already won. Not because of fame, not because of the golden buzzer, but because somewhere out there, someone hurting had heard her voice and felt less alone. And in the end, that was the most powerful victory music could ever give. As the opening notes of her next song echoed across the theater, Simon looked toward the stage with a quiet smile. For once, he wasn't thinking like a judge. He was simply listening like everyone else. And deep inside the glowing AGT theater, under the lights and cameras and roaring applause, Yeng Constantino sang her heart out once again, reminding the world that sometimes the strongest people are the ones brave enough to cry.